One in Three is intended for mature audiences. Episodes contain explicit content and may be triggering as they often include violence and other varying forms of abuse such as emotional, psychological, sexual, and physical. In most cases, names have been changed to protect all involved. Please note, statements and opinions of guests do not necessarily reflect those of my own. Hi, Warriors. Welcome to One in Three. I'm your host, Ingrid. As you are well aware by now, domestic violence encompasses many forms of violence. One of those, however, I have neglected to talk about for too long. Legal or litigation abuse is when an individual utilizes the law or legal threats as a method of control. They may use tactics to intimidate or wear you down. My guest today, whom I will refer to as Viv, is a survivor whose case is still ongoing. 8 years later. Her true identity is not used as her next court date is quickly approaching. Here is Viv.
Thank you so much for having me and really finding me, because I think that is one of the most important things that's coming out of One in Three podcast is that people are finding one another who've had sometimes different circumstances, but have all kind of experienced a similar pattern. And when we find one another, no matter where we are living and what our lives are like right now, I feel like it's really powerful to have validation of what we've been through and to kind of share around how we've tried to navigate the challenges of survivorship. So my story is not very different, I think, than most other survivors. And I'm not going to go in depth about all the details of what I experienced, but I'll say that my journey with an individual that I became involved with and was only in a relationship with for just over 2 years is very, very similar to almost all survivor stories, which is meeting someone who usually moves you very quickly into a relationship, figures out pretty quickly the things that you value most or want most out of life, and then kind of manipulates those things to make it appear like those things are happening or possible. And so oftentimes we will move quickly and thinking that it's because this is just so wonderful and everything that we want is right here. But it's all deception. Most of it is deception. And so that happened to me. And for a very long time, I've carried a lot of kind of guilt and shame for not knowing better. But over the time that I've been navigating my own personal survivorship, I've met a lot of folks, a lot of women particularly, who have had the same experience. And it's really helped me to process my own decisions, because I think I did make decisions, but again, I wasn't really informed of the truth about things. And because of that, I'm here 8 years later after getting out of that relationship.
There are a few things that you said that really stuck out to me, and that's the guilt and shame. And that is so common. I think what happens is people look at victims as the reason of being abused as opposed to the behavior of the abuser, of how did you let yourself get into that situation? Why did you let yourself stay in that situation? And I think that's one of the reasons it's so difficult for any of us to leave, is because you start to question yourself. What did I do to cause this? And it's embarrassing to tell friends, family, colleagues, or whomever of what you're going through. And I think that's just a very important point that I do try to stress as often as I can, the embarrassment or the shame factor, because it's not your fault. It's not my fault. It's not any of our fault. It's them. It's the abuser that has manipulated and done this. And it's not because we're unintelligent or we're foolish. Possibly a little bit of naivety, but that's just because you want to believe in human kindness, like just being a decent human. You want to believe that that's what people are. And I think perhaps that's why we overlook some of the things.
Yes. And Ingrid, I think like for a very long time, I felt like like I took it so personally. Like, also, how could this person have thought that it was okay to do this to me? Like, why me? Of all people, there's tons of people in the world, tons of women in the world. Why me? And what I've really learned, over this especially the last 5 years, is that it could have been anyone. And in fact, it likely was someone before me that I just don't know about, but I do know that there was someone after me, and almost the same thing happened to her. I think there was just some differences that gave her a little bit more protection that I didn't actually have. But, it's a difficult thing also because there is this intersection with people often too who are abusers, right? That they sometimes also have other mental health issues going on. And so for myself, I recognized and was aware that there were other issues happening for this person, but because I didn't grow up in a home that was abusive or know the kind of things that I know today about patterns of abuse, I didn't recognize those things for what they were. I thought that this person was strictly having mental health issues, and that actually staying and enduring was actually supporting this person's health and healing and well-being. But actually what I've really come to understand is that it's two sort of separate things. And while mental health, some of the mental health issues can sort of fuel or like kind of take away the inhibition that people may have to abuse, they're really two separate things, because many people who have mental health issues are not abusers, and they don't harm their partners. But when you're in the thick of it and you can't sort of, I think for me, I spent a lot of the time in that relationship confused all the time. Like, wait a minute, what's happening right now? Like, confused. Did I do something? What's happening? Is it, that kind of confusion, again, I felt I didn't know up from down. In a very short time, I was really, again, only in that relationship for just over 2 years. It moved very quickly. We were cohabitating. We ended up having a child together. And when it was over, I was like trying to understand what had just happened. I think that also is a really important takeaway, is like, some people spend 20 years with an abusive partner, and for all the reasons that we know, either can't get out or they don't get out. And I just feel really fortunate. I see the amount of damage and harm that just in a little over 2 years happened to me. And here I am. It's going to be very soon 8 years since I split from that relationship. And I have been in court with this person for that entire amount of time. So in the 10 years I've known this person, 8 of it has been spent in court. Because once that relationship broke and I said, you cannot live here anymore if you are going to continue to abuse me. That was the bottom line. And deep in my heart, I don't believe that I really thought it was like, I'm bottom lining this person and they're going to get it together. But that is not what happened. And it's, I think, typically not ever what happens. And instead, this person looked for the quickest avenue to exert power. And it was through the court system, through the family court system. And so really talking about the specific things that I endured, physical abuse, psychological abuse, those things, again, very similar to what everybody, to many, many survivor stories. But I think what I really want to focus on is what happens when you stop cohabitating with that person, and when you stop that relationship with them, that how they can continue to find ways to control your life. Now, if we did not have a child together, it would be different, because there could have been a clean break in the way that we could be done, and I could have moved moved away. I could have stopped all contact. But when you have a child, that links you to that person, unless that person decides to disappear. And so I've been over the last 8 years through several different iterations of trying to control me through parenting, through the parenting experience. And that runs all the way from threatening me, including during the pregnancy, that this person was going to have the child removed from me. Like, and when you don't know better because you don't know the law or you've never sort of crossed a bridge like that before, those threats are very scary and very real. We've been from that point of like trying to get custody all the way to just about, I want to say it's not quite a year and a half ago or 2 years ago almost, sorry, that the person tried to give up their custody. So like went through all of this rigmarole, all this drama, all these agreements and trying to do all these things. And then finally was just like, nope, I'm giving up my custody completely. Had me sign paper. I mean, and then change their mind like 9-10 months later. So it just creates chaos, not to mention the incredible financial strain of being a respondent for such a long period of time. And really the courts not ever sort of recognizing that what's happening is a continuation of control over the circumstance and over the person.
There are a few things again that I thought of. So when you were saying like the threats could be scary because you don't know better, it's also because over time and just subtly, and then eventually not so subtly, they break you down and they wear you down and they make you second guess everything. Like, is that real? Am I the crazy one? Did I make that up? Did that not really happen? And so you're not even sure what's happening that's real, that's not real in your life anymore. And then when they come and they say things like, I'm going to take the baby out of you, you're just kind of in this whirlwind of trying to survive more or less. And then like, okay, now what? Now there's that threat. So how do I go about dealing with that? The other thing, when you leave the relationship, you think I've survived. I'm not that victim anymore. I'm now a survivor. But as long as they're an abuser, they can keep you in that victim status. And I think the whole like, I want custody. I don't want custody. Let's go to court. Let's not go to court. It's just another way of keeping you on edge and keeping that uncertainty in your life of, oh, okay, so are things good? They're not good. They are good. Oh, good. I'm going to get what I want and what I need. Never mind. They just ripped that rug out from underneath me. So again, it's all just it's the way that they can maintain control and keep you second guessing and trying to keep you disrupted. And I think what's important for all of us is to understand that these patterns are there. They don't change. This person is most likely not going to change. I think that there are some instances where people can become a better person. So I'm not going to discount that. But in a lot of these cases, that's not what's happening. And so I think, unfortunately for us, we always have to stay on our toes and just be ready for what's to come.
I agree with you. And I read this really powerful quote that said, abusers, they don't abuse everybody. And because they have different faces, right? And the person that I deal with, is very performance oriented. And so people will say, oh, that person, such a nice guy. Wow. So outgoing and, personable and really loves his kid. And yes, I mean, because that's part of this, right? Then it makes it seem like I'm crazy because I have fear of that person, right? And that there are concerns for our child's safety and my safety too in interacting. And I've had a lot of that too, where I've expressed to the court, we had a guardian ad litem for a period of years. And this person never screened me for DV, never took seriously any of my concerns about safety of the child, safety, my own safety when doing exchanges. So I feel like, can people try to manipulate the family court system and say that things happened that didn't? Sure. But I think what the research says is that it's extremely rare that people do it. And if they try and they meet with any kind of resistance with it, that they give up, right? Because they see that their tactic is not working. And so I feel like people like myself and like you and many others who really try to express and tell the truth. And, I could be spending my time doing so many other things, right? Use my bandwidth for so many other powerful, good things in the world. But I'm here 8 years later, still asking the court to consider my safety and our son's safety and well-being. So if this wasn't real, let me tell you, I would be like, I would like to be spending my time and my effort and my worry and my money, right? Everything on other things. And so it's a very frustrating circumstance because I just think that the family court system, especially here, they just don't care. And it's reflected also in the kind of laws that pass here. Now, as of last summer, there is a 50-50 is, what it is. But at the same time, we do have a measure that if a judge believes for any reason, even if there is not significant proof of violence, but that there is a risk that is related to any kind of family violence, including DV, that family court judge has the ability to limit the contact of the child and the person who is a potential threat. Yet, I don't believe that measure is well understood. And I don't think also that family court judges have the kind of training and awareness that they need around legal abuse, around financial abuse as well. And also just understanding in general all of the different ways that somebody who is abusive, what that can be like and what that looks like. And it was said to me, he never punched you. Never punched me. Okay. But then what about all of these other things that happened, right? And it just becomes really interesting how we define abuse and how we define risk of our safety and of our children's safety. Because again, what we know, what's in like the scientific literature, what we understand about people who have control issues, abusers, is that the things that it's not always this direct abuse that leads to terrible circumstances, right? It's something that happens. And that's why Florida did adopt a measure that is in place, but it's not being, I don't think, again, judges understand it. We continue to have people that kill their children.
Right.
They kill their ex-partners and then they kill themselves. And that is a very legitimate concern to have in some of the cases.
I think there are a few things on this. In defense of a judge, they have become accustomed to every single person that steps into their courtroom for whatever offense, speeding ticket to murder, that person that's standing in front of them is there to deceive the judge. And so it's very difficult for them to be able to understand who is the believable person and who's the liar in situations. And I think what happens, especially when you're first coming out of the relationship and you have now just made that decision to remove yourself from that situation, you're still broken down and you're still being actively abused. And it's easy to get in front of a judge and crumble because you're treading water, you're trying not to drown. And then now you have not always a sociopath, and I know that's not the proper term anymore, but you have you have somebody that's standing there that has no empathy, no understanding that anything that what they have done is wrong, that everything that they have done is justified because of whatever made up scenario they have in their head that you have done to them. So they are able to stand there confidently and speak clearly and truly believe that they are the not the defendant in this case. Like they have nothing to defend. They're the ones who are being wronged. And so when you have a judge who's looking at, well, this person has all of their shit together and they're able to talk clearly, and then you have this other person who's fumbling over words, maybe that person's not telling the truth. Maybe they're making things up and that's why they're fumbling and they can't form a complete sentence and tell me what's going on. There definitely needs to be education across the board. And I mean, I think for those of us who can keep telling stories and keep pushing and letting our voices be heard, that will hopefully make a difference.
Well, I think another really important thing to bring up here too, because we're talking, you and I, we're talking a lot about like survivorship, right? And I just also want to bring up like the survivorship aspect of our children. Because, for instance, my child was really small and was exposed to fighting a lot of like escalation, had been taken out of my arms during conflict. But he doesn't have any memory of even us as parents living in the same home together. But there's still something there. And then there's all the aftermath of it, like all the things we're talking about right now, the financial impacts, the ACEs, right? The adverse childhood experience that come from also your parent being a survivor and your other, parent being, a perpetrator. So it's like these things, we know so much about them, but they're not accounted for when it comes to looking for the best interest of the child. And I would definitely say in the state of Florida, what my experience has been is like the person who is the guardian in this case in the last few years before going on the stand to testify had not even met with the child for more than a year and went, again, it's like, it's so the whole thing has been focused on the father, on his rights, the hope that this person will like get themselves together. And I'm just like, man, where is the child in this? Because that's what it's about. Because I've been told like your safety is not an issue, right? Like we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the child. And it's like, okay, but this whole thing has been about this man. It's a very frustrating process. I know myself that the most important thing for my child, for our child, is for him to know or believe that he is deeply loved by his parents. And so I've really tried to adopt that as like my mindset. He will get older. And when he gets older, he already asks so many questions, especially because this court process is gone for so long. And I don't talk to him about it, but how does he not see like all these weird things that happened? And then his father's disappeared and all of these different things. And my survivorship is part of who I am. And so I do a lot of work now in advocacy in the area of IPV and family violence prevention and intervention. And so my son understands that and sees that and has asked me, why do you care? And it's because it affected me. It affected my life. It affected his life. So I know as he gets older, I know he's going to have a lot more questions. And this is part of his journey too. And the thing is about the court is that all of these things that have occurred exist on a court record that people can access. And at some point as an adult, he will be able to access and request those documents to see that, including the criminal case that also accompanies this circumstance, if he chooses to.
I think that is definitely one of the major concerns for parents when they get out of these relationships is what happens to my child. And then you look at your child and you wonder, well, DNA, they're half that person. And is that person a result? Is it nature? Is it nurture? Where did all of that come from? And it's so important to keep a strong, stable, home, if there's a shared custody or majority, whatever the situation may be, when that child is at your home, like you said, make sure they know they're loved. And as much as you may dislike your ex-partner, you need to let your child know that that person also loves your child. And to have that strong home environment will help them in their future. And the concern is like, am I raising somebody that's going to end up to be just like that other parent? And as long as you're able to provide a stable, consistent home, there's a stronger chance of them becoming a stable, well-balanced adult, despite everything that they have to go through.
Absolutely. It's difficult because I want to be able to kind of say some of the things that occurred that also I feel like are often get overlooked as like incidents, right? Like, oh, well, that just happened. It just happened one time. But, one of my concerns for the safety of my son was that the person who abused me also experienced multiple hospitalizations for mental health. And that was not disclosed to me. I didn't find that information out until after, including right before meeting each other. And then there was a person after me, a partner after me. And that partner found me and contacted me around concerns about safety and asking me, like, do I have any idea what's going on? Because that person also was not made aware, but was obviously like experiencing similar things. Not only controlling abusive behavior, but also seeing some concerns, having concerns about mental health, right? And I just want to say, I am not a mental health professional. I'm just a person who has had to become a little bit more informed about these issues because of my life, the life experience that I had. And so what was really interesting is this person did come forward, did talk about the experiences that she had, including testifying. And basically the judge said that it was like and I just want to say this really quick. We had myself and the other person had never met each other. We've never spoken to each other. The only thing is that there was a contact to me, but then I didn't want to contact that person for my own safety because I didn't know if that person's communication was being monitored. You know what I'm saying? Like all the feelings that you have, like, why would they do this? Like to contact me like this could put me at risk and this person at risk. So basically turned all of that over for attorneys to be able to navigate. And the person's story was quite similar to mine. And the judge said that the stories were just too similar to each other, as though like we were working together. And it's like, no, we're two different people. We both have a child with this person. We've never even met each other or spoken. And we're telling you our experiences in our testimony. And they're just too similar. It's almost like we use the same terminology or something to explain something. And it was just a shocking situation. And also for me recalling. So let me backtrack for a minute and just say this. So after being in court for 6.5, almost 7 years. So that's like going through so many processes. We almost went to trial. We'd sign an agreement. Nothing would be done with that agreement from the other party. Like nothing ever moved forward or materialized. And so then we went through the period where the person was giving up custody and had me sign documents and then change their mind. And then we ended up at trial a year ago in September. And basically I had to recall all of the things that I experienced. And so did the other person as well, which again, there were some differences, but very similar pattern of control. And basically the judge said that what I experienced, she didn't see it as abuse. She saw it as sort of just a relationship that I stayed in and eventually did get out of, but that they were not abuse. And that was extremely difficult to hear and accept. But again, I know what happened to me. I know what happened to my son. And I'm here and I'm living my life. Unfortunately, the way that the ruling on the case came down, there was no final ruling. And so in 2 weeks after it's like been 9 or 10 months now, we have to return for a continuation of trial. And at that point, I mean, everything right now is a bit of a mystery, like even why this is happening or how this could happen. The judge in the case was moved out of family court, but had the right to retain the case and did. So in 2 weeks, I will go back, and there were certain things that the other party was supposed to do and take care of, including having a mental health evaluation and there being a report to kind of better understand what's happening and if that person is getting treatment for whatever comes out of that. And we're 2 weeks before, and we have no news. We have no anything. The other thing is that after not seeing the child for, it was about approximately 2.5 years, maybe just a little bit more than that, the judge allowed the child to be with the father without any monitoring of a visit. And it is minimal time, and it is in a public place, but still it's like, you go through all the details and you tell all of this stuff and your concerns. And basically it was really there was no concern on the part of the judge when it came to the child's safety. And then also there's the whole aspect of like no contact with the child for 10 months and attempting to give up custody of the child. No one really asked any questions like, well, how has this impacted when it comes to the guardian who testified? There was no information about any of that because she had not met with the child. And the judge, I guess, didn't really see that there could, or perceive that there was any issue or damage just on that alone. Earlier, you said that there's like that kind of what happens in these cycles with people who are abusers and have control issues like this. Is this just constant pattern of disruption that they create in your life, but it also disrupts like the stability of their children's lives? And courts just don't seem to want to address that. Or I can't say that they're not aware. I just can't, based on all of the trainings that I see that are available to people, also trying to ensure that actors of the court are given training and have to have some awareness. I do kind of feel like it's just, they just maybe don't care about that so much. It's really demoralizing as a survivor to just keep telling the story and trying to show how you're doing everything that you can to create stability and counter the disruption, right? Just not recognized.
It's very dismissive. It's a very dismissive feeling for a judge to hear this and just be like, meh, whatever. This is what I decide. Your case blows my mind because, I mean, he did say he wanted to give up rights at one point. You would think just that, even if he were seeing your child, just that you would think, well, let me step back a moment and maybe not just award time to him just right out of the gate. It just, I don't know. It's very frustrating. And like I said, it is very dismissive. Is it the same judge that said she didn't feel that what you went through was really, oh no.
Yes. The other thing I want to say too is when you think that we've been in court for almost 8 years now, right? During that period of time, there was a criminal case that was also happening at the same time. And multiple times we almost went to trial. And then basically there was something that someone, and I'm not saying on my side, I'm saying on the other side, right? Like was supposed to do and didn't do. And so things would get pushed back. I think it was 4 times that we were meant to go to trial. And every time we would come up to that point, there'd be an ask for an extension because these things are not done. And also, one other thing I want to just point out is throughout this whole entire period of time, there's been no order on child support. So basically, for the last, we did put into place, like we agreed on an amount that was supposed to be like paid monthly, and it never did. And it's never, I mean, now finally we've seen the Department of Revenue childhood or child support office, sorry, begin to try to do anything, but it's basically like 10 or $20 per pay period or month or whatever that ends up coming through, because a whole other side of this is that this person who was a competent working person who was doing their thing and making a great living also just basically decided to not work. And so again, you would think that, first of all, the very first thing that any family court judge should be saying is, how is this child being supported? Where are they living? What is the stability of the circumstance for the child? And who's contributing to that? So, and I'll be totally honest with you, I'm just going to say to you, when this person said, I'm giving up my custody, I was like, oh my gosh, it's bittersweet. It's bittersweet because for my son, it's just, that was heartbreaking, right? For him. But at the same time, the feeling of safety for him and for me, for both of us, it was like, oh my gosh, there's a part of you that just feels this sense of, but the flip side of that too is that I would not have pursued. I would not, if they walked away, I would not go looking for them. I would not try to collect anything. I'm just like, please just stop suing me. Just let me care for this child. And that's why I had negotiated agreements and things in the past to try to not prolong this situation. But essentially, here we are.
That's the thing. You're not going for this financial gain. You're just going for stability and peace and being able to move forward and live a life and not have to constantly look behind your back to see what's coming after you.
Right. And I get these really intense feelings sometimes, like, oh, I have no control. And then I'm like psyching myself out. I have to stop right there. And I have to think to myself, this can't go on forever. Technically, this person could do this for another 10 years, right? 9, 10 years. They could continue to use the courts in the way that they have been using them to kind of, again, be disruptive, to attempt to create instability, which has an impact on the child too, because the child now and even previously would be told like, pretty soon this is going to be over and you're going to come and be with me and you're going to go to this other city where this person lives, which is, do you understand what I'm saying? And my kid's like, Mom, what is happening right here? What is happening? Is that real? Is that true? And how do you answer questions like that? Or when this person tried to give up custody, of course, I didn't tell my child that. But the person, the other parent, just literally from one day to another, just disappeared, just stopped calling, stopped any contact, didn't send cards, didn't call. And so my kid was like, where is my dad? Is everything okay with him? How do you address these things? It has impact. And at one point, my son said, do you think I'll ever see my dad again? And I had to be very honest and say, I really don't. No, I can't answer that question. The uncertainty, right?
And that's the terrifying thing is that uncertainty. And I think you're doing a great job. You have to be as honest with your child, depending on their age and where they are. Be honest and keep that open line of communication so they know who they can trust. They know who the stable person is that they can speak with. And I mean, the truth sucks. There's no other way to say it. The truth absolutely sucks. And you don't need to disclose everything to the child. Eventually, as the children get older, absolutely, you can disclose whatever you feel you can. But it's just so frustrating because you're still trying to maintain that person does love you as well. You don't want to paint this awful picture about them.
No.
And I think the other
Right.
fear too, eventually as children get older and they also recognize like that is half of me. So am I
Yes.
that? I don't know that in any of these situations there's a clear win. Again, unless even when the perpetrator is out of the picture for whatever reason, incarcerated or has passed away, there's no clear win because that person was a part of your child. Whether even if it was in their infanthood, there's still that question of, is there a mental health issue that now as the child of that person am I going to be predisposed to? And it's a very long battle. It's not a hopeless battle, but it's exhausting. And I think that's another thing that these abusers look at is I know I can wear that person down. And if I just keep this up eventually, and a lot of times that does happen, unfortunately, where the victim does throw in the towel and either is like, I just can't do this anymore. I will comply with whatever they give. Or in some extreme instances, they take their own lives because it gets to be too difficult of a struggle. And I mean, there has to be a change because right now, what we have in place in terms of domestic violence, in terms of legal, from calling and reporting and trying to get a restraining order all the way to the court system, it's broken and it's not designed to actually help the victims. And a lot of times it just re-victimizes or even can hurt the victim in some instances. And we have to do something about it.
Based on what you were just saying, there's another thing that I want to say. And I feel like there have been a few people who have been on this journey kind of with me, even during the time that I was in the relationship, and they really saw me struggling and trying to figure out what to do and how to navigate, and knew that something wasn't right. They obviously were right there, kind of experiencing what was happening in my life, the instability that was happening because of these circumstances. And even though people have had that, were there and saw it and stuff, there have been a few people that are like, are you going to get over this? Like, are you over it yet? I was like, how do you ever fully get over it? Especially when then it's continuing, but in the court, right? It's like, I'm a respondent. I'm not choosing to be there to do this. I would not be choosing this if I didn't in my heart believe that there are legitimate concerns for the safety and well-being of the child. And then because you're just also getting kind of pulled through this whole process, what do? You can't fully get over it. And it's meant to. I mean, I think many, many women and men as well, but many, many women sign to terms that are not in the best interest of their children, are not in the best interest of their personal safety as well, because they cannot afford, not only financially, but the bandwidth that it takes to be a respondent, right, in these circumstances, while you're also trying to care for your children, care for yourself, heal. And so what happens? People sign things that they don't really want to and shouldn't have ever signed. And it creates even more ripple.
And it's a legitimate fear too, because you go into the court system, you can plead your case, you can have a rock solid case, but ultimately it's that judge. And that judge can be like, I don't like your hair. I don't like you. So I'm going to side with that person because and truly, hopefully that's not the case. I had a friend go into the court system actually in Florida, and the judge said, you can say whatever you want to say. Ultimately, it depends on how I feel at the end of the day and whether I like you or not.
There's no accountability of that system. Mm-hmm. And there's no accountability also of all of these different actors within the court. For instance, the guardian ad litem. Now, listen, I'm going to just tell you that I do believe in the guardian ad litem system, like in theory, but there are guardian ad litems that they work for profit. Like, they are not doing this out of the kindness of their heart. They are doing this because they are being paid, and handsomely, to be an actor of the court and be the eyes and ears of the judge. But unfortunately, that there's no accountability of these folks. There's no kind of standard of how they are supposed to conduct their work or what they're supposed to do. And if something happens or bad happens, they are not responsible. And that also was a major eye-opening experience for me, because you expect that there's some kind of control or standard, right? Like, that these folks operate under, and it's just not there. And they know, many of them are not versed in DV or family violence as an area. You know what I mean? A lot of them are people who either they're from the legal field, or they're like psychology, social work, but that doesn't mean that they have specialized. And many people who are going to engage a guardian ad litem are going to be people that have those kind of circumstances. So those folks who are actors of the court, they need to be experts in family violence, IPV, all of these things. And because, again, the court takes very seriously what those people have to say. And if those people don't have expertise, they're giving courts information, they're giving judges, right, information that's not accurate, again, and not in the best interest of the children.
Absolutely. And I think with that system, even if they were in it because they actually felt this hurt and they want to be part of it, I could imagine the burnout. It's even like Department of Children and Families. You have perhaps people go into that and they're so overworked and they're so overwhelmed. And if you get too emotionally vested, you'll lose yourself, you'll lose your mind. And it's just such a broken system on so many different levels. And there are so many areas to improve things. It's overwhelming. I did have a guest on who she had written a book, The Ecosystem of, I'm going to say the title wrong because I don't have it in front of me, but I like that she used the term ecosystem when describing domestic violence, because there are so many different parts of it and they all contribute. And which again, it does seem overwhelming, but then it also seems like, okay, we could actually tackle this because we can address that section. We can address that section and that section and that section, and hopefully come to some better conclusion than what we have at our fingertips right now.
Yes. And I want to just say one other thing too about having been in court for this many years, a respondent in a case that's gone on this long. I also just feel like, at what point, when you have people that we've gone multiple times and agreed on terms and have agreements, parenting agreements on what this is going to look like. And there again, because we would make one and then nothing would ever happen with it. Do you see what I'm saying? You negotiated and nothing happens. It's just a piece of paper. That's what happens. And then that person decides that they don't want to do that. And then they pursue more legal, like they pursue the court, right, as the answer. And then you go back to mediation. You create another plan. That person doesn't honor that plan. And then they decide they're not happy with it. And then they bring it back. Do you understand? It's just like, how is this allowed to go on? Because we could have come to a place, and we did negotiate terms that created some safety nets for the child, that created what we could live with. And then those things never were honored by that other person, who then decided they wanted to change those terms and just continued and continued and continued to bring it back to the court. And at what point does the court literally say, enough, this is enough? And recognize this as non-compliance, and recognize this as a tactic of control. And they don't. And I will say that I think like they say that it's approximately 4% of cases, like where people split, and there's been circumstances like the ones that we've experienced of abuse. And so it's a low number, but the family court system has to be nimble enough, right? Like to recognize those things and react to it and say, enough. This is enough. This is what you signed, and you need to honor that. And it does. That's just doesn't. It just doesn't. It's not happening.
Right. And the statistics, I personally believe, are skewed because we don't always say. I know people who have gone to court and they've filed for divorce for irreconcilable differences. And it's actually because of domestic abuse, but they just want to have a quick,
Right.
so
Yep.
for sure, this is happening way more often than
Yes.
anyone is aware of. And the statistics, I don't think, add up to it. Legal abuse, I'm very happy that you came on it and have talked about this, because that is a neglected or unknown form of domestic violence, because you don't have bruises, you don't have broken bones, you don't have a sexual trauma kit. You could possibly have therapy and those records because of this, but it's not recognized because everyone else is focusing on, well, hospital records. Do you have a hospital record of coming in with broken bones or broken rib, whatever it was? Oh, you don't? Well, what is that really abuse? Okay.
Right.
Even I think it is slowly getting to be recognized as mental. There is the concerns for PTSD and things along that nature, but I feel like that's even not necessarily recognized as well as just physical violence is what domestic violence is. And legal abuse is huge. It's huge. And it probably happens in, I would say, a very high percentage of domestic violence cases. And it's just not known.
Yep. So the litigation abuse and financial abuse are these very deeply intertwined pieces because it costs so much money to litigate. And then most of the time, unfortunately, women, it's not always, because sometimes there are women who make more money or have more means than their, past partner. But in many cases, men have more credit, they have a higher income, and they're able to flex that to engage attorneys, where then typically the respondent, who is the female, is like a woman is trying to figure out, oh my gosh, how am I even going to have an attorney to represent me as a respondent in this circumstance? And also there's the thing where people don't pay child support. So, I mean, I think there are some really good examples of things that have happened in other states where it's like, okay, you split, okay, then and we're getting an order for who's got the child right now and who's paying what. And it's like right out of the gate. But that's not been my experience here. And I have also tried to engage, because it also costs money to do that. So I just want to point that out too. Like, pursuing child support also costs you money, because you have to have an attorney who gets the person's information. And also that's been a major issue in the case that I've been involved in, where the person will not provide their financial affidavits, right? Updated affidavits and proof that supports anything that they do provide. Like an affidavit, you can fill in anything, but if you don't provide supportive documents. And so just some of the things that this person has done to slow the process, because how do you ask a judge to rule on something if you can't even get the person to give you documents? And then that person's not held accountable for not complying. And it lengthens your whole your whole time that you have to be in court and have an attorney. And it's just an unreal circumstance. And you tell people this and they're like, well, you could have done this, you could have done that. And it's like, well, you know what? We've tried all these different avenues, but it's just, there's a lack of accountability. I didn't do it, I would be in a lot more trouble. I'm the respondent. And so there's like a different standard I feel like you're held to when you're the respondent, like of cooperation.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's all a tactic to just wear you down. Like there's eventually he or she's going to run out
Right.
of money. Eventually he or she's going to run out of patience, and
Yes.
they're not going to be able to handle this anymore. Then there's the aspects of, I have friends who their ex-partner has quit their job, similar to what you were saying, but they're still working, but they're a contractor, so they're able to be paid in cash. And so now there's no line of proof of financial income. And there are so many tactics that they use to, again, just wear you down, maintain the control. or like they don't care. I'm living by myself. I don't care if I live in a shack right now, as long as it's going to hurt that person, that whatever reason, 8 years later, I still need to be manipulating and trying to control and abuse.
Yeah. Every circumstance is different for people, but there are lines that are just the same that run through all of these stories, right? That we tell. And it is like, I do not believe that this person is trying to punish me because they love me so much or something. I think anybody who this person gets involved with is going to be punished because that's how this person operates in the world, especially with anybody that they've ever been intimately involved with. And it's just going to be like that. But it's not really punishing me as much as it's actually punishing our child. And that's not recognized. When I think about the amount of money that I have had to pay to not walk into a courtroom without an attorney, just to have representation. I mean, the quality of life that our child could have had, with the money that's been spent doing this. But again, that's why I say, I don't think that people sometimes, not tell the truth. Yes, but it's teeny tiny compared to the people who really do advocate for the health and well-being and safety of their kids, because it's just too much that you're risking and that you're doing. It's so much of a compromise that you're making to do this because you understand the severity, right, of like what is possible because you lived with, that person and it and who harmed you and harmed your children.
Absolutely. I think this was a great talk. I really do. And I think what's really important, as we've said, the recovery from domestic violence and the resources that are currently there are not ideal. The best way to stop domestic violence is to prevent it from happening. And I think awareness is key. That's in no means am I putting this on victims and saying you should know better or whatever. It's just no one knows what is truly out there. And there are red flags. And I discuss that in other episodes. Also, when you're in the situation, you may not even recognize what's happening. And it's important to hear stories like yours to show this is abuse. You're not imagining things. You're not overreacting. This is actual abuse. And you may be in it right now. And here's what can be done. Here's how to get out of it. Here's what you should do. And then hopefully here's what to avoid. And for family members and other people to recognize that, hey, my loved one might be in this situation. How can I support them? And I mean, that's, I guess at this point, and hopefully there can be some law changes. And I have been able to thankfully talk to different people where there are some things that are happening that are changing for the benefits of domestic violence survivors. And again, domestic violence is incorporating all of it, all of the sexual, emotional, psychological, legal, financial, physical, all of that all is under that umbrella. And, I think we just need to keep going. We need to keep being loud about this, get the statistics updated, let people know what is happening, and we're not going to be quiet about it anymore.
I agree. And I think from my perspective, also, I just feel like that the need for accountability of the family court system to be able to respond, to recognize and respond to DV, IPV, and family violence in the many different forms that it takes, including the actors of the court, like guardian ad litem, all of those other folks, parenting, anybody who's doing like the parenting, counseling, and coordination. All those people there need to be accountability measures for them, that if something's going wrong, that you have the ability and that they recognize IPV. And the other thing I was going to say is there are many, as we know, many victims who lose their lives. right? They don't get to have the conversations that we're having right now and get to, I hate to say it like that, but get to deal with all these other problems because they never made it. They were murdered by the person who perpetrated them. And what I want to just really say is that we need more. I feel like what happens with services for survivors is like, okay, are you safe? Are you is your life in danger? No? Okay, you're cool. Go ahead. Get some counseling, or you know what I mean? Like, there's so many, like you said, other parts of this, from being able to get back on your feet financially, being able to navigate all of these other systems that are not being responsive to IPV, and surviving your survivorship. And what we know from the research is that, unfortunately, people who experience this in their lives have a much greater risk of chronic illnesses. And I think about that every day. I'm like, yes, I want to thrive, but at this point right now, I just want to survive. Finishing out whatever this is, I have 10 more years that this could go on in my life. And for those 10 years, I need to stay healthy. I need to stay here. I need to be here for my son. And these are real things. And there is not support in the survivorship sort of scope of those things, at least not where I am and not from what I have experienced.
I agree. And so, not to totally bash on family court, but this is where our issues are. If you were to bring a case in the criminal system or a civil suit, you know the perpetrator would be found guilty and there wouldn't be this drawn out mess. But because it's going through the family law system, for some reason, it's difficult for anyone to comprehend that perhaps this person should not be a part of this child's life anymore, or perhaps there is a bad guy and a good guy in this situation.
Yeah. I mean, having also gone through that route as well, I at least in the state that I'm in, I don't have a lot of faith either in the, criminal process, criminal system. I don't know. I don't know how to weigh in on that other than just to say, I agree with you in the way that there is a lack of recognition and responsiveness that diminishes the risk to the well-being and safety of our kids and also us. I have to go, and whenever has to be an exchange, I have to go and interact with a person that I do not feel safe around, but I do that for my kid. And I figure out ways. I never go alone. We have all these like little safety things that are built into how we do this. We never go near my car or to that person's car, like we're in a public blah, all these things. Man, what would it be like if I didn't have to always be thinking about these things, and that somebody also in the court system is also thinking about these things through the lens of like the safety and well-being. It's like, yes, when people split, there's conflict. It's inevitable. Almost all people, when they split, there's some conflict. But then with regular relationships, I don't even know what that means, but you know what I'm saying, where there hasn't been violence, let's say that, violence, abuse, and control issues like we have experienced. Yeah, people get on with it and they get on. And I've seen incredible examples where people have partnerships and they're split and they take care of their kids and they love their children and they still do things together and they've been able to heal sort of thing. That doesn't happen when there's been abuse. It's not, is it possible? I don't know. I don't know, but I'm going to say that it doesn't happen because there's still that propensity for that person to try to exert control and their stuff, right? The person who they abused, including through the children. So I just really can't believe that it's 2024 and that we can't figure it out, that we can't take the research and use the research to innovate the systems that have so much to do with the well-being of children and the well-being of functioning, healthy, thriving people in the world. We don't do that. It's like the systems are 20 plus years behind what the research is telling us needs or can be in place to create better outcomes. And we're not using it.
We're not. And I don't know, I mean, other than for all of us to keep telling our stories and keep doing what we can to be heard, I don't know personally what can be done. I'm hoping that the right people hear it and we can figure out where to go from here and keep advocating for ourselves. And, you mentioned before of how people are like, when are you going to get over it? I have a friend who actually asked me, so how many more episodes are you going to do with this domestic violence podcast before you're over it? And I'm like, oh, no. Because the thing is, even if I feel like I'm in a stable place personally, I know someone else is not. So for those of us who have the capabilities to advocate for the others that are still in it or are going through it or trying to survive themselves, it doesn't end. We can't let it end. So we just need to keep pushing, keep doing what we can until somebody can shake up this ecosystem of domestic violence and get it taken care of.
I agree. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm looking forward to coming back after returning to court and coming back with a final ruling.
And everyone, we all wish you so much luck with that, and looking forward to hearing what the outcome, hopefully favorable outcome, is.
Awesome. Thank you so much for doing what you do, Ingrid.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing this. This is huge. You and I have talked about this before. This podcast is a collaboration. It's all of us. We're all doing this together.
It's really important. And I'm really looking forward to, like you said, the messages that we have. They're important for other survivors to hear, for people who support survivors, but also for people who have the ability to create meaningful change at the community level, at the state level, and at the national level for how we respond to IPV and family violence.
Absolutely. Again, thank you so much for your time and going through all this. I know it's hard, but it's so helpful. I really appreciate you coming on.
Awesome. Thank you.
Viv, thank you for giving us an insight into the turmoil litigation abuse has on domestic violence survivors and their children. I'm looking forward to our next conversation. Warriors, please send love, strength, prayers, positive vibes, whatever you believe in, to Viv as she enters the courtroom again. We briefly talked about the exhaustion experienced with legal and really any form of abuse. If you or anyone you know is contemplating suicide and you are in the United States, please call or text the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988. As always, thank you for listening. I will be back with another story for you. Until then, stay strong, and wherever you are in your journey, always remember you are not alone. Find more information, register as a guest, or leave a review by going to the website onein3podcast.com. That's the number 1, IN, the number 3, podcast.com. Follow 1 in 3 on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at 1 in 3 Podcast. To help me out, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. 1 in 3 is a .5 Pinoy production. Music written and performed by Tim Crow.